some amount of value to what we're accustomed to or what, what we have been doing over the years. So this morning, I'm going to present it briefly on scholarly approaches to teaching and learning general chemistry in higher education. My examples will not be focusing solely on chemistry because I also teach a little bit of environmental science. And so I'll be looking at examples from both areas. So just a brief overview of the presentation, background and context, where I'm currently at, what were the pedagogic challenges, looking at what we call research-informed and evidence-based approaches, implementation and evaluation of interventions within the classroom, and how do you transform these interventions into publications. So just a little bit about where I'm at now. I'm teaching at Zayed University, which is located in the capital of the United Arab Emirates, Abu Dhabi. Now, most persons know about Dubai and they think that Dubai is the actual country, but Dubai is actually one of the cities in the United Arab Emirates, and Abu Dhabi is the capital. The institution is a mid-sized institution, approximately 10,000 students across two campuses. One campus is in Abu Dhabi and the other one is in Dubai. It is one of the 3 federal higher education institutions in the country, totally funded by the government, so students do not pay for tuition. 99% of the student population are Emiratis. That is what the local students are called. So Jamaica, you're from Jamaica, you're a Jamaican, you're from the UAE, you're an Emirati. They do offer scholarships to a small amount of students, mainly from Eritrea, and we have a few students, like 3 or 4 from Pakistan and a few students from Palestine. Students are taught in an English as a medium of instruction environment, which I'm going to be referring to as an EMI environment for short, and their mother tongue is Arabic. It's an extremely diverse faculty, group of faculty that teach these students, and many of the faculty are not English language speakers themselves. English is not their first language. When I speak about diversity, my former college, the University College, there were approximately, on the Abu Dhabi campus, there were approximately 75 faculty from 30 different countries. That is how diverse the population, the faculty demographic was. Students are taught in a segregated environment. What that means is that male students are taught differently from female students. So you have a male campus, you have a female campus. The infrastructure is mirrors itself. So whatever you have on the female side, there's a replica on the male side. Faculty are able to go between the male and the female campus, but students have to stay on their specific campus and they leave through different gates and that sort of a thing. And faculty teach both male and female students. So I started Zayed University, we call it ZU, in 2013, fall of 2013. And I came here all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and I was excited. I came thinking that I am a good teacher, I know what I'm about, and this is going to be business as usual. And at the end of my first semester, I was shocked, to say the least. My students did not perform how I expected. They didn't fail because we have a lot of diverse assessments for them to do. It's not just end of semester exams or midterm exams. They do projects, they do journals, that sort of a thing that accumulates towards the final grade. But generally the grades were not what I expected. Those were not grades that my students in Jamaica would normally get. Just a summary of some of the things I observed: very low comprehension, lack of retention and transferability, rote learning. Whatever you write on a slide, that is what they're going to give you back. It's a read and regurgitate sort of a thing, word for word. Reduced or no critical thinking. When you're designing your question, you do your question in such a manner for critical thinking, for them to interact and pull info from the information, those questions would either be poorly answered or not done at all. Fatigue and frustration. I was frustrated, so were they. And I found that they were not able to understand and use science jargon. Yeah, very, very limited in terms of that. And it was just, for me, it was just very sad. And we have an inside joke where it's a very transient society. So people come and people go very often. And so when we refer to persons leaving, we would say, do you want fish or chicken? And that's suggesting that you're on the flight back home and the flight attendant is asking you your choice of meal. And at the time, another Jamaican was working at the institution. She's also a past student of UA, Dr. Copeland, Dr. Edia Copeland. She's Prof. Kawa's past student also. And I went to her office and I said, I think I'll soon be on the plane being asked fish or chicken because I'm just not making it. It's just not working out. I'm not being successful. My students are not learning to the extent that I want them to learn. And at the end of that semester, that winter break, it really gave me pause. And I thought back to Dr. Pinup. Dr. Pinup was a master teacher in every sense of the word. And he was very reflective, extremely reflective in his approaches to teaching and learning. And a few weeks ago, Catherine spoke about the Pinup Method. And the Pinup Method has many prongs. And one of them that I'd like to talk about today is how reflective he was as an educator. I remember we were doing physical chemistry, and you know, the Bible of physical chemistry is Atkins, P.W. Atkins. Everybody knows that book. And that book is not the easiest to understand. And I remember Dr. Pinup, he said to me, I'll be back shortly. And he went home and he came back and he had wires, the wires that we used to make clothesline in Jamaica. And he went to the workshop and he sat with Mr. Tyndale and he sat with the workmen there and he made a sphere from the wire. And he cut out triangles and he came to class with it. And he was trying to help us understand the whole concept of Schrodinger's equation and Heisenberg uncertainty principle. And he was presenting to us a three-dimensional approach to the 2D information that was in the book. And we enjoyed it and we understood it. And my experience when I came here brought me back to that space, brought me back to his approaches. And it really gave me pause. And I started to look at myself. How did I see myself as an educator in an international context? I am coming from a scenario where students would delay doing a course until they could get into my class. Now I have students that are not learning to the standard. Their experience is not at the standard that I'm accustomed to. How did my students see me? Will my students recommend me to other students? How did my students see themselves? You know, and what could I do to make their experience meaningful? And I think that last question is what Dr. Pinup asked himself every single day, every single lecture that he went to, because you could see the difference in his approaches semester to semester. He never stopped improving. His approaches were always dynamic. And I think that's one of the things I want to build on today. And so I decided that I needed to do better, realistically speaking. I needed to raise my bar. And the university has a Center for Educational Effectiveness, and they started to offer training and workshops. And I guess because they understand that the faculty population is very diverse, we're catering to students that we would not necessarily teach in our home country. And so from these professional development seminars, I completed one called the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning. And there we were introduced to action research in the context of education. And here I have a simple, let me get my pointer. I have a simple diagram that shows just a summary of what action research is. Identifying your problem, you chart a course of planning, you perform the action, that's the action in the action research. You observe, you evaluate, you reflect on what you did, you report it, and then you go back to planning. So as we would say in Jamaica, you wheel and come again. And this is a cyclical process. You plan, you then action, you observe, you reflect, you report. And so I decided that I was going to try that in my class. So the first thing I had to do was to look more in depth at what the problems were. The main problem that I did not consider was that students were learning science in a language that they were still struggling to master. Now, most of the students do what is called an International English Language Test. We call it the IELTS exam. And most students get an average of 5.5, and they're accepted to the university like that because it's a federal institution. So if the students apply, we take the students. So a 5.5 in the IELTS exam is not a very high score. So we have students from 8 to 5, varying degrees of English language competencies, and they're in the same class, yeah? So when I looked a little bit more in depth at the issues that I was facing, they're learning science in a language they're still struggling to master. They may more likely encounter learning difficulties that would affect their participation and ultimately their learning in science lessons. And probably that's why they were not very engaged, they were frustrated, they were fatigued. It is further believed that these types of constraints may result in reduced academic attainment in science for students who are studying in an EMI environment, in an environment that is not in their mother tongue. So I delved a little bit further in the literature, and I came across an article by Johnstone and Selipen with my colleague and I, actually, Dr. Solas, and because we were brainstorming this together. And this is a very rough sketch of the issue, but it really tells the story. For somebody that's studying in the language in their mother tongue, when they get information, it's just about reversing and processing, transferring from short-term to long-term memory. For somebody that is studying in a second language, they have the additional problem of translating, or the additional challenge of translating. And so if you look at this circle as their total working cognitive space, a part of that space goes to translating. And we see that daily in our classes. We're teaching, and a student leans over to somebody and said, "What's happening?" That student responds in Arabic, and you see the light bulb moment. Oh, wow, okay, fine, move on. So you could see that this translation was an issue for them. We also have to look that science and chemistry has its own language, yeah? Nobody is born learning to speak chemistry. So that's a language that we have to teach. So if you look at the average student in an EMI learning environment, they're learning the language, the English language, and they're also learning the language of the science. Yeah? So their translation space is taken up even more, which compounds the challenges. So what would work for these students? Because something must work. It's not, you can't just give up. What would work? So when I went to the literature, they suggest that techniques that did not depend on formal mastery of language that would reduce the linguistic burden on the students would be useful. Such methods should provide a meaningful context for English language and literacy development, which would provide a medium for engagement with the scientific content. So the reality of the situation is you have to find methods that doesn't solely depend on English language mastery, but at the same time, these methods should help them to improve their English language mastery, right? Coupled with teaching them science and chemistry. The literature suggests that collaborative activities would be useful because students can operate in a pair-assisted learning environment, and hands-on active learning strategies would also be useful. Something that I had not considered when I migrated was the societal culture. And I assumed that students were students, yes? So how hard could it be to teach university students? And so I did not give a lot of attention during that first semester to the role of culture and how it influences the teaching and learning environment, yeah? So when I delved in the literature a little bit more, I found that an understanding of the culture and its inclusion in the teaching intervention is imperative with students not proficient in the language that you're teaching in. So while teachers should be aware of the language differences and student difficulties, one should be aware of how you can use the culture to impact the teaching and learning experience. So I started to observe my students a little bit more, and they were extremely creative and artistic. The pictures that I have on the right are actually drawings that were done by one of my students. At the time, I was working on an iBook, a book that could be used on the iPad, and it was for an inquiry-based science course. And the student drew these pictures for me that I could have included in the book, right? And she did it like in 30 minutes, like this. This was how talented they were. You give them projects to do, anything that had to do with an artistic component, and you were totally blown away. The other thing I noticed was that they liked to collaborate. I mean, even when you didn't want them to collaborate, they were always working together. And it was just a little bit strange for me. Once you set an assignment to do, they huddled, right? And what was even more strange was that they didn't have to know each other, especially among the boys. They did not have to be friends. I remember one day setting some classwork and I saw two boys were sitting together and a third joined them, and the conversation they were just conversing. And so as I was going around, I said, something came up and I said, what did your friend, that was referring to the last person that joined the group. And the person said, Missy's not our friend. We don't know him. I said, but you're talking. He says, yes, we're doing the work. He joined us, but we don't know him. And I'm like, you're joking. No, they are very, very collaborative and they like to help each other. So I wanted to use those things in designing an intervention. Then I came across an article that was done at the same university of somebody just like myself who was very concerned about how the students learn and just wanting to impact positively the teaching and learning experience in this context. And in her publication, she said that what Arabic students says work for them are easy English language terms, basic English language, repeating information, and summaries. And for me, the easy English language term gave me pause because I remember setting a test and I had do this or calculate this, I can't remember exactly, but I think the question had therefore or hence, something like that. And the question was either very poorly done or not done at all. And so I went back to class and I'm like, why didn't you do this? And I started to break it down and I explained it. And the student said, teacher, what is hence? I'm like, what is hence? They were not aware of what these words were. And so I realized that I had to cut out the frills, stick to words that they can understand. There was another time I was talking to a group of students and another student wanted my attention and she said, teacher, that's how they refer to you, teacher. And I said, hold on. And I continued talking to the group and she said, to what? And I said, what? She said, you said, hold on, to what? And I'm like, I mean, wait. She said, I thought you wanted me to hold something. It was we laughed about it. But then I realized that I had to be aware of how I speak because I'm not speaking to persons that have English as their first language. So anyway, having this information, artistic students, they like collaboration. That gave me a thrust to start planning. So I wanted an instructional method that surrounds the students' cultural practices. I wanted to enhance engagement. I wanted to cultivate interest. I wanted to create a foundation for building sound scientific knowledge and to develop scientific literacy. I wanted hands-on activities that were not based on language mastery. And so when I started to read a little bit more, I realized that what I wanted to do was somewhat based on what is called a constructivist learning theory, where active learning within groups, where individuals form and construct knowledge by assigning personal meanings to it after making logical deductions based on peer interactions in the form of questioning, discussions, negotiations. So by interacting with the material, by asking questions, this enhances critical thinking and problem solving, which is what I wanted. I did not want read and regurgitation. The constructivist approach further goes on to say that knowledge construction is aided by visual tools that help to organize students' prior knowledge and incorporates the processing and understanding of new information. Researchers suggest that a constructivist learning environment makes the classroom flexible and relaxing. And we all know that in a comfortable learning environment, students are more open to learn. So this would be a little bit easier, which was what I wanted. So the aims of the intervention, I wanted methods that would be able to increase student engagement, increase student comprehension and performance, incite critical and analytical thinking, stimulate an interest in science, and encourage students towards intrinsic motivation and science self-efficacy. So one of the methods I came up with is called mind mapping, and it's not a new technique by any stretch. In 1976, Tony Buzan came up with a mind mapping concept, and he said that this activity uses both sides of the brain, and so processing productivity will be increased and translate into greater retention. So mind map is quite simple, and we are very familiar with it. We do it, and we're probably not even aware that this is a formal method that we're doing. We have the main subject area, and we look at the different branches from this subject area and the sub-ideas from the main branches. So what's the principle behind mapping? Is that ideas should move from abstract to more concrete. Mind mapping is a pedagogic technique that supports a constructivist learning theory building on prior knowledge. It's a graphic organizer, and this is known to be useful to students in an EMI context. And visual representation, its hope, would reinforce the spoken word and aid with comprehension when you're teaching students in a language that they're still learning. So what was the evidence that this will work? Because this is how the whole scholarly approach comes into play. You want to find methods that are evidence-based and research-informed. So basically what the literature is saying is that the more students, if students can draw diagrams to show complex relationships of concepts by critically analyzing the ideas that make up this concept, then they will be better able to understand and remember them. So by interacting with the material, you're looking at moving this information from the short-term memory to the long-term memory. Also, pictorial knowledge representations are thought to help students self-regulate their learning by externalizing what their thoughts are and to see what others are thinking. Generally, pictures and diagrams are more comprehensible than just words. Good. And so I started to evaluate, would this be useful? It probably would be. Mind mapping can be done in small collaborative groups because a cultural aspect is that they like to collaborate, right? Even as it relates to decision making in the society, most decisions are made from a familial perspective. Mind maps are concise. They can be used to summarize lengthy lessons. They can use simple English vocab. The mind map supports a constructivist learning theory. They can add new ideas and build on their previous knowledge. And it's an active learning strategy that promotes and prompts prompt feedback, which is it's a very, very integral feature of good teaching styles, especially in the context of EMI. You need to be able to quickly identify misconceptions, misunderstandings, errors, because if you don't do this, this will carry through for the semester and impact them negatively on summative assessments. So how did we implement this intervention? Concepts were taught to students. Students identified keywords and main ideas. They were placed in small groups of 3. They brainstormed in their groups. They created their mind maps, and then the maps were formatively assessed. So this idea that I had, my colleague and I, Dr. Solas, we sat and we worked together on this because the issues that we were having were common to both of us. And so we came up with a rubric, because it's not just looking at the mind map. We came up with a rubric. How will we assess it? So this rubric I'm sharing was one that we had designed for the global warming. We were teaching global warming. And so some of the points that we wanted them to make sure were included in the map. Names of gases were specified, the source of the greenhouse gases, the relationship between gases and the radiation illustrated, effects of global warming, methods to control and prevent. And then based on what we asked them to draw, the key points would be changed depending on the topic, but the general rubric at the bottom would remain the same. So we did this. So at the time we did it, it was not to do anything more than to get our students more engaged and want to participate in classes. So let's look at the results, how they drew. The diversity in learning styles came through with these mind maps. Initially, we brought colored pencils and paper to class, and this was really fun, especially amongst the male students. They're like, teacher, I've not used a crayon in years. But they liked it, they liked to collaborate, they drew with paper and pencils, and most of the girls preferred to use mobile applications, such as their mobiles, the iPads, the iPhones, whatever they had. So what did we realize? So after we collected the maps, we analyzed them based on the rubric. Many of the students were now using the keywords and phrases from the class. I'm not sure how the resolution is on your side, but on the left-hand side of the screen, this is a mind map from a kinetics class. And we have where students are talking about order of reaction, the rate law, what the definition of order of reaction. They have the different integrated rate laws for the different orders of reactions, and they actually dropped in the different maps, the different graphs, sorry, for concentration versus time or rate versus time. On the right, there's a mind map from an environmental science class, and you can see that they were using their words ecosystem, efficiency, thermodynamics, food web, that sort of a thing. What they drew. The technique was originally created as a revision exercise to get them to interact with the material, understand what was being taught. But then we realized that some students started using the technique to take notes during class. The ease with which the maps were drawn and the sparse use of non-technical vocabulary and elaborate sentence construction made the map useful for quick summaries. Students were able to focus on technical vocabulary pertinent to a science class without having to consider complex sentence structure and grammar. They were able to focus on selecting the main ideas that were required for effectively summarizing the lesson. This was one of the ways in which students guide and direct their own learning. Some students chose to elaborate on each main idea by writing brief paragraphs or And here I'm showing you one where they wrote a lot of stuff. And this was from a colligative property class. We were doing general chemistry 1. So we were looking at colligative properties, freezing point, boiling point elevation, vapor pressure, that sort of a thing. So this was a very dense mind map with a lot of information. This is another one from a kinetics class. And you can see that some boxes had more information than others. And we looked at the information that they were putting in. Is it correct? Is it that they know more? For example, if you only wrote one sentence for a particular arm, is it that you don't know enough information or you just didn't have the time? So when we went back through the mind maps and interacted with the groups, that additional information came through. Of course, it wasn't perfect because we got mind maps like these, yeah? Was this because of misconceptions, misunderstanding, no interest? It didn't matter. When we got drawings like these, this was reason to have a chat with that group, those students, what's happening here, and then we could firm up whatever we needed to based on the responses that we were given. So what were some of the general findings? It was a useful tool for summarizing lengthy lessons. It enhanced quality of students' responses on summative assessments, increased student engagement and more time spent on task, more focused communication amongst their peers. Instructors were able to quickly identify and correct misunderstood concepts. Students were able to receive immediate feedback on their knowledge constructs, and it was a useful way to incorporate technology into the classroom. Yeah. We also found emerging themes. Students were studying from the maps. Students were sharing their maps with each other. Students were asking us if we could tell their teachers how to apply the maps to their other courses. Students were seen creating maps on topics that we did not even assign a mind mapping task to. So as I said, this was just an idea that was created to get students more involved. But then at the end of it, when I finished the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning course, I was like, but I did some good stuff there. We did some good stuff. So I decided, why not collect the students' perceptions? What did they think of the intervention? And I designed a very quick 10-item Likert scale: strongly agree, strongly disagree, 2 subscales. Was the mapping helpful? How was it helpful? We collected some open-ended responses. We coded the qualitative responses. I spoke to a statistician. She did some fancy stuff with the responses from the close-ended questions. Some more fancy stuff here. I won't bore you with Cronbach Alpha, internal reliability. And we put the story together and it was published just like that. And for me, this was very exciting because this was the first non-pure chemistry paper that I had written and got accepted for publication. And I think why this was also meaningful for me was that it showed that something that I thought was just very simple, me doing dotting my I's, crossing my T's, I realized that if I just went a little bit further, then this could add to my scholarly work. And so building up from this concept where we could have students draw what they thought, that sort of a thing, Dr. Solis and I further collaborated on another project, which we call Concept Sketches. And basically students generated annotated concept sketches after we taught a lesson. So similar to mind mapping, concepts were taught. Students were asked to take notes during the class. They were then asked to draw what they understood from the lesson. And we asked them not to use the internet, no mobile phones, no nothing. Just draw what you can from your notes, from what you remember. And it was quite interesting because drawing is not language specific. You don't need to speak drawing to draw. And this was extremely useful in this context and the students loved it. I mean, you could hear students fighting, I do not want a purple sun, I need the yellow marker. The boys found it so exciting because they never believed that this could be applied in the context of higher education. Similarly to the mind maps, we reviewed each drawing. The students, for example, if you look at this drawing, the student seems unsure of how exactly photochemical smog is formed. And so this is information for us as instructor, because next class you would want to firm up the whole formation of photochemical smog, sort of a thing. Another example is shown here. You notice that none of the names of the pollutants are on this drawing. And so that gives us time to reflect. Do we need to cover that? Do I need to meet with this group? You compare the maps. Was it only missing from this map? Or did all the students not get this part of the teaching? The class. And so this was also published. Dr. Solis and I worked on it and we published the students' annotated sketch and how we evaluated the effectiveness of this intervention, how it enhanced teaching and learning in an EMI context, and it was published in the Journal of Turkish Science Education. Other examples that I would like to share with you about just enhancing, taking scholarly approaches and enhancing the student and learning environment, especially with COVID. And I'd just like to share a few of these practices with you. And one of the things that we use commonly is what is called Google Docs. And I told you, and this is all about the collaboration. Students love to collaborate, right? They like to work together. Now, Google Docs is free, so some of you may know about it. It facilitates ubiquitous asynchronous and synchronous communication. So if let me minimize my screen, and this is where, just 1 minute, this is where the active learning and engagement will come in a little bit. So if this is, just a minute. So if this is my screen, I am going to paste a link in the chat box. Where's the chat box? And I'm just going to invite you all to open this link. So what is unique about Google Doc is that we can all work into this document at once. And it might seem confusing, but how we approach it is that each student, we use this for students doing reports. So each student is assigned a page and whatever tasks they have to do, and they complete their report. They do not have to meet physically. Can you see my screen? Let me see if I'm sharing the right screen. Just 1 minute. Wait. I'm just trying to ensure that you're seeing the right screen. Are you seeing the Google Doc screen?
Yes, we are. I am.
Yeah.
Right. So this helps students to collaborate anywhere, anytime, synchronously, asynchronously. And then as the instructor, I can go in and I can give comment, I can give feedback, and you can apply the settings so that you can see the changes made during editing. So this is really nice. I can give comments, I can set tasks. If I click here, I can add a comment, good job, etc., etc. Students can see that, they can resolve the comment, they can edit the comment, they can reply, and that sort of a thing. And this is one of the other methods that we use. Another method that we use to enhance teaching and learning is something that's called Kahoot. And Kahoot, so I've changed gears a little bit, yeah? So Kahoot is a gamified approach to enhancing student engagement in class. So we're just gonna play a short Kahoot quiz. And you can use your mobiles, you can use your computers, and you're going to go to kahoot.it. So www.kahoot.it. I'm going to paste the link in the chat box. And when you enter it, this is the game pin. Can you hear the music?
Well, I'm not hearing the music, but I'm where I should put in the game pin.
All right, all right, so just log in. So we're gonna wait for about 5 or 6 players.
Where's the game pin, Dr. Will?
610-6397.
No, time is upon us, so we have to move along quickly.
Right,
okay?
all right. So we're gonna just start with who we have now. And so it comes up like this. You select the question on your screen. And at the end, the answers are shown. Yeah, which of the following is not a chemical property? Yes. And the answers would come up. I'm not even sure the answers are correct based on the selection, but this is how it would go. And we're seeing that Abby is the leader, and the students like this and they're excited about it. Oh, I wasn't sharing the sound. Yes.
And I'm in 10th place because I didn't even answer.
And then the last thing I would want to share is what is called Padlet. And this is one of my favorites because sometimes students do not want to speak up in class. And so Padlet is a nice way in which we can collect anonymous feedback in terms of what you liked, what worked for you in class, what you learned, what you didn't learn. And so it would basically be my sending the students the link, and the student would give feedback. The student would give feedback. So if I share the link in the chat box, you can give feedback as to what worked, what didn't work, what method you would like to explore a little bit further, what you'd like us to discuss, and we can do that at another time. Yeah, so you can still enter your comments in the chat box. I'll just look at them at a later time. So since time is up on us, let me quickly wrap up. These technological approaches that I've infused in my classes, I actually wrote about them. I actually documented the experience, and especially in the COVID-19 context. And these were published in the Journal of Chemical Education just this 2020. And so what I'm hoping that you can get from my presentation is that I know we have all been doing great stuff in our classroom. From semester to semester, we try new ideas, we try new interventions, but the additional step is to take it to the publication level. And that's where the reflecting, the documenting comes into place. And I hope you have taken that from today's presentation. So just to remind you of the scholarship and of teaching and learning process, identify your classroom problem, look at your classroom experience, identify the challenges that you're having, try to implement the solution, evaluate the outcomes, modify the teaching and learning experience, report the findings, and then you keep it going. Why is this approach important? In the current context of international education world all around, due to massification and commodification of higher education, education institutions, especially in the higher education context, are being held more accountable. We need to ensure that the teaching and learning objectives of the institution are met, and it also means continuous professional development of our skills as academicians. And we need to ensure that chemistry or science or whatever your area of specialization is being taught with the greatest of enthusiasm. I hope today's presentation in honor of Dr. Pinup did just that. I hope that I will be even a fraction of the teacher that he was. I hope he would have been happy to hear what I have taken from him and what I've translated into the context that I am now working in. And as I finalized the presentation last night, I came across this Irish poem, this Irish blessing that I thought was very fitting. May the road rise up to meet him. May the wind be always at his back. May the sun shine upon his face. The rain fall soft upon his fields. Until we meet again, may God hold him in the palm of his hands. Wow, good, Dr. Pinup. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wilson. Dr. Pinup, his light is shining in you, and we are very proud of the work that you have done as he would have been. And we thank you very much for that powerful presentation and the impact you're making in all parts of the world. Ladies and gentlemen, time is upon us. We have until 10 minutes past 12 to leave this platform. And so because we have to move on to Prof. Lancashire's presentation, if there is one burning question, somebody would like to open their microphone and speak. I have some comments here. I have someone saying that Stalia, very thoroughly researched and well thought out planning strategies to overcome the language barrier hurdles. She's asking, did you have to learn Arabic at any point? Dr. Wilson, I'm going to allow you to respond to that.
It was not a requirement, but it helped. And the students like when you use Arabic phrases or jargon. So I have a few. but not complete sentences, not full-fledged conversations. I'm not able to do that at all. But I do have a few buzzwords and they're like, wow, miss. So yes, they like when you embrace their culture, but it wasn't a requirement.
We have two people who would like to speak. We have Dr. Michael Ford, who is at the St. Augustine campus, and Dr. Zayar Min, who is at UTech. We're going to ask them to be very brief, very quick. I'm giving them a few minutes. Go ahead, Dr. Ford.
Hello, can you hear me clearly?
Yes, I can.
Yes. So I was wondering, first of all, did you have any research where you tested the reading age of the students from an English reading age standpoint? That's the first question. And the second is, could you comment on our students here? Because you came from Jamaica, right? So you had some experience with teaching there, I suppose. And I wanted you to comment on the use of your techniques for our students from the standpoint of the mastery of English. Because we believe that many of our students actually have mastered English. And part of the issue that we have teaching, particularly St. Augustine campus, is the fact that their comprehension level is actually quite low for many students. So could you comment on that?
Okay, so in terms of the English assessment, we had a department for that. And I say had because that's no more effective this year because the university has restructured. So students that come in with very low English language scores, they were placed in what is called the Academic Bridge program, where they are taught English for anywhere from 1 to 3 years. And when they got to the minimum score, which is 5.5, then they were transferred over into the regular campus, for want of a better expression. Some researchers collaborated with persons in that department in terms of trying to correlate their scores with what's happening in the classroom. But I cannot speak to in terms of what those results are, because personally, I did not do it. It was a little bit difficult because we had mixed students in classes. We had students who got international education in private schools, British schools, American schools, Canadian schools, and those students tend to have a better mastery of the English language than students who were coming from solely private schools. So no, I didn't look to check, but I know some studies went on, but not necessarily as it relates to science classes. It was more focused on the English aspect of things, and they did that in the English department or the Academic Bridge department. Your other question as it relates to our students, the thing is that these techniques, while they work for students in an AMI context, they are also transferable to any student, because as I said initially, no student starts by speaking the language of chemistry. And so whatever you can do to get students to be more comfortable with the jargon, the terms, the phrases, then that would be an effective process. I will tell you though that these processes, they take time, they take energy, because you have to give feedback. It makes no sense you do it and you do not give the students feedback, but it's really rewarding in the end when you see the differences in how the students are performing, classes that you use these techniques in and classes that you don't.
Dr. Min, can I ask you to do this for me in the interest of time? Can you put your question in the chat, and Dr. Wilson, could you continue to respond to comments and questions that are coming up in the chat so that we can proceed with Prof. Lancashire, please?
Sure,
Thank
no problem.
At this point, ladies and gentlemen, I welcome Professor Emeritus at the UE Mona, Professor Robert Lancashire, who is former Professor of Computational Chemistry and Chemistry Historian, to do a reflection in tribute to Dr. Willard Pinup. Prof. Lank, over to you.
Still morning? Yes. Hi, everybody. I've put together just a few slides with some pictures that I've been able to come across over the years. I've known Willard for nearly 40 years. He joined in '82 at Mona again, and I'd been there for a couple of years before that. So let me see if we can move this thing along. My screen is, there we go. All right, so many of you may realize he was born in Highgate in St. Mary, and he started school at the elementary school there and continued on in school in Highgate before he moved on then to a private Catholic school in Anoka Bay, before eventually moving down to St. George's College. Interesting that he'd been a choir boy in the Anglican Church in Highgate before he converted to Catholicism while he was at school in Arthur Bay. A few pictures from St. George's era. He was on the football team, he was a member of the student council, and he was also president of the chess club. He married Georgia, I think around 1969. They moved off to the UK for some time, and then he came back, as I say, around early 80s. Of course, his pride and joy was his 4 daughters, and the eldest, Caroline, then Heather, Catherine, and Georgina, in reverse order in the picture here, youngest through to eldest. You can see this one looks like the cheeky one, right? Extended family, I think George's sister and perhaps George's parents, and then the whole clan in for celebrations. His first employment was as a scientific officer at the Sugar Lodge, and this helped make him realize that he wanted to continue on in science, and he came back to UWI and starred as an undergrad and postgrad in chemistry and physics, or physics and chemistry perhaps. So he's an alumnus of UE, and then later on, when he went off to the UK, he studied at University of Dundee in Scotland. So he joined back as a member of staff in '82, and as an enthusiastic educator and as an outstanding lecturer, he received numerous awards supporting this fact, including the Monsignor Gladstone Wilson Award for teaching, UWI Guardian Life, I think their very first award, and the VC's Award for Excellence in Teaching. Even though he retired, he was still on campus many days a week and continued to serve the department as an adjunct lecturer and consultant. For the 2004 Guardian Life Award, I happened to have come across this that he'd shown me, which gave the sort of student assessment forms that we used to have in those days. And here we are, we're seeing a whole heap of 4-point something or others, which is what was part of the information sent to Guardian Life, who then gave him this award. The picture on the left was one day in my office, I grabbed him and said, listen, we need a picture for the chemistry website when we started it back in 1994. Number of other pictures that have shown up around the time. I think this one was with looking at the monitoring devices. He was very much into the idea of solar energy and solar panels. He had fitted up his house when in retirement, so that he was totally independent, I think, of JPS for much of the time. Here was a trip as part of his work going off to a nuclear power plant in what was then, I think, Russia. Never forgetting his time in Scotland. This was a trip back at some stage where I'm surprised he wasn't in the kilt himself. And here was a citation that was read, I think, for his retirement, so handed on by Tracy. One recollection I have, I've never really seen Willard upset. He was such a mild-mannered person, but he came in one day and clearly he was frustrated. And I said, what happened? He said, well, I've just seen this newspaper article from Antigua. I went down with Tony Walling, who was head of electronics unit, to do some work monitoring something or other there. And when we reached the airport, we were met by some people from the newspaper. And they approached Tony Walling, who was walking with his big briefcase that he had. And clearly they recognized that he was the senior person. And so the article had mentioned that the senior scientist was Tony Walling and the junior assistant was Willard. Anyway, that seemed to have galled him a little bit. Here are some pictures from his retirement party. So up on the left here, we have Prof. Lehrer, Neville Ying, Dr. Mirage, a group including this person, Novelet, Greenaway, Ronnie Young, and the current dean, and Tony Ellis. Willard remained a devout Catholic throughout his life, and in retirement became a lay preacher and celebrant. And so, as I say, just a few quick pictures. When I was putting this together, I was reminded of an obituary I'd read of the first professor of chemistry at London University, who died very early on in 1836. And his classmate from Edinburgh, who later became Sir Robert Christensen, remarked, "During the many years we passed in one another's society, I have reason to believe he never made an enemy and never lost a friend." And I think that's a very fitting sort of quote that I think would equally well apply to Willard. For those who have access to the web, the family had set up some pictures at pinupfamily.wordpress.com, which you should go and have a look at as well. So as I say, just a very quick set of family photos, some donated from the daughters, others that Willard had passed on to me over the years, and some of them are my own. So without further ado, I'll pass back to Marva Dean.
Thank you very much, Prof. Lancashire, Dr. Wilson, and colleagues. We have a few minutes if anyone out there would like to make a few comments, whether on Dr. Pinup, his life and work, or on Dr. Wilson's presentation this morning. Prof. Lancashire, there is so much you've done for us in terms of chemistry, but in terms of preserving that which is so precious, the history that we need to guide our future. We say thank you so much, and for always being so willing to share with us. This thing that you do is, we know, I'm not sure how much reward you get for it otherwise, but know that we are grateful. Is there anyone who would like to say anything at this time?
Yes, Dr. Singh.
Dr. Parker, go right ahead.
Hi, I just want to congratulate Dr. Wilson on her great presentation. And it's something that I always say, we take so much from our supervisors, you know, we're there with them and we learn so much, and it's great to see that Dr. Wilson has taken so much from Dr. Pinup. He was an excellent teacher, and it's great to see that she would have taken, you know, that. So that's it from me.
Dr. Parker, that is special of you to make that comment. It is great to see Dr. Wilson shine in the same light as Dr. Pinup. A master teacher, that picture you put up, Dr. Wilson, reflective, thinker.
Yes, certainly. And it's amazing the little things that you pick up. He had this habit of when he's thinking, he closes his eyes. And so you're talking to him and you would think that he's not listening. And I find myself doing it because it helps you to focus on what is being said and you shut everything out. And I didn't even realize I was doing it until one day a student said, "Miss, why are you not looking at me?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" So your eyes are closed. And I just had to smile because it only meant something to me because this is what Dr. Pinup used to do. You know, so the little things that you absorb. Thank you very much, Dr. Parker. Dr. Pinup's selflessness goes beyond bounds. I remember when I gave birth to my son and I was by the university hospital, and on the second day, somebody came and said, "There's a priest here to see you." And I said, "Priest? I don't know any priest." I said, "Yes, there's one here to see you." And Dr. Pinup sent his childhood friend, Dr. Professor Horton James. I can't remember his first name, but he was from the Aquinas Church. And my son got a full-fledged blessing on the second day after entering this world, because Dr. Pinup sent him. He said, you need to go bless that little boy. And that is the supervisor I had during grad school. Yeah.
You know the greatness of a man when his work lives on. Dr. Wilson, we thank you again for sharing with us and for the excellent work that you continue to do and the way you continue to impact the world, even as Dr. Pinup did.
Marvin?
Lancashire. Who is that? Dr. Donald. Dr. Donald, we have 1 minute. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I'd just like to acknowledge the influence that Dr. Pinup had on my experience. I remember just after the day that I declared my major, I came out of the room where you had to go and sign up. And the first faculty member I saw was Dr. Pinup, and he asked me, we were just talking, and he asked me what I was up to, and I told him I just decided on my major, and he said, what did you decide on? And I said, a double major in chemistry and physics. And that was when I found out that that's what he had done a long time before. So it caused me to think that I was not completely crazy to be thinking of doing both of those things together. And over the years, he was also too a big encouragement to me, just knowing that we both had the same kind of undergraduate interest. And so he was always a very, of course, excellent teacher and a very pleasant face in the department. I didn't do graduate work with him, but he was still very encouraging and very positive during my time at UA. So I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you, Dr. Donald. Ladies and gentlemen, we have another meeting beginning now. You have an opportunity to continue this discussion next week. We have Rashida Khan, who will speak in honor of Dr. Pinup, coming up. You will get the notice for that. Thank you all, and please stay safe. Dr. Moritz, thank you very much for the introduction. Everyone, have a good afternoon. Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Take care, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.